Hey there, and welcome to Decoding the Digital Lab with CSols, the podcast that addresses current events and offers insights. I'm your host, Megan Pettyjohn, and in this series, we're exploring economic shifts that are impacting the lab informatics systems across all industries. And in today's episode, we're going to focus on the chemical and energy sectors, how they are navigating the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, as well as their response to tariffs. Joining me today is Kyle McDuffie. He is the CEO of CSols, a leading lab informatics company where he keeps a watchful eye on the market fluctuations and considers how best to serve his clients in response. And before CSols, Kyle worked in the chemical industry for 15 years, implementing and using LIMS solutions. Hi, Kyle. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Megan. Thanks for having me. It's always great to be here. And I think it's a very relevant and timely topic to talk about Made in America and what does it really mean. So just a couple of introductory remarks about, the uncertain and ongoing tariff negotiations, country to country world between the U.S. and the rest of the world, as well as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, are pretty exciting topics that have been headlines over the past several months. And they have significant implications for all industries, of course. Now, Made in America, which you may have heard of, is a broad descriptor and kind of rallying point that ties these initiatives together. And simply put, it's about onshoring, meaning creating new capacity in the United States, or reshoring, which is about moving capacity from another country to the United States, and how the government is trying to make that attractive for companies in various industries to do that.
All right. So let's explore what this anticipated investment in the U.S. manufacturing, particularly in the chemical, petrochemical, oil and gas, mining industries, really means for quality control and quality assurance related laboratories.
Right. So I think unlike some industry segments like pharmaceuticals, biotech that are still, working through shaking out the uncertainty, it's pretty clear what the current administration's point of view is on chemicals, petrochemicals, energy, mining, etc. And they've made that pretty clear through the passing of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which passed, I believe, in June of 2025. So just for an example, I did a quick Gemini search of projects related to Made in America manufacturing in those sectors between April and 2025 and October of 2025 through independent sources, not just things that are posted on government sites. And I came up with about 50 major projects within those industries, with a total value of about $20 billion that fit into either one of onshoring or reshoring. So it's a pretty significant shift in investment.
From your vantage point, Kyle, what are the short term and long term implications of this push for the U.S. chemical and energy and mining industries, especially for their QA, QC functions?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty key question, but let's first of all sort of narrow the field, if you will, to talking about quality assurance and quality control type laboratories in manufacturing. So specifically, those are the groups who worry about the quality of the raw materials, the in-process materials, the finished goods that go to the customer, and they're the ones responsible for certifying that those things that are made through the manufacturing cycle are meeting the contractual and specification limits that have been set. So the difference between quality control and quality assurance is really control is an ongoing activity which you do on a day-to-day basis based on the framework that's been set up as part of your quality assurance activity. So typically those involve some sort of a laboratories or a series of laboratories that are testing these various materials as they go through the process. And those labs are typically supported by a number of software technologies, the most common one being the Lab Information Management System, or LIMS, as it's typically referred to. Now, as we look at it, the price that you might be able to charge for that product is directly related to whether it meets the specification or not, or perhaps gets downgraded to a different price. So I know that's a long-winded explanation, but as the U.S. capacity is expanded and the supply chains are disrupted that exist today and rebuilt perhaps differently, it will be critical for the quality assurance and quality control functions and by extension, the laboratories and the software tools that support them to be able to expand and reinvent themselves without ideally adding any new people. So in the short term, I see a lot of feasibility studies going on. I see a lot of people resurrecting mothballed capacity, either a plant or part of a plant, followed by mergers and acquisitions, and a certain amount of stockpiling of inventory has been going on to avoid the tariffs from other countries.
It's funny you say that because we just completed a survey of over 150 respondents in the chemical and energy industries. And one of our questions was, in what ways have tariffs and regulatory acts affected your material sourcing? And inventory stockpiling was a response of 67%, which is crazy.
Wow, that
Uh,
makes sense. Yep.
yeah. So what about long term?
So long term, as at least through this administration, it means constructing new facilities to within the U.S., including new labs, expanded testing capabilities, and a shift to a more US-based supply chain for certain types of goods, assuming that the raw materials are available here. So there are some limitations, and that will be to avoid these tariffs from other sources.
Yeah, that makes sense. If companies in these sectors are indeed getting more capital and incentives to invest domestically, where do you think they're likely to direct that capital first? Is it exploration, new facilities, operational efficiency? And can you give us a few recent examples of companies making these commitments?
I can. So I think typically you would expect people to look for low hanging fruit first. So that's going to go to areas where there's a quick return and or maybe they have an immediate bottleneck. So operational efficiency efforts and expanding existing infrastructure are usually the highest priorities first. Examples of this would include, for example, ExxonMobil's doing an ethylene plant expansion, it's due to start up this year. BASF is building a new facility in Michigan, and Century Aluminum is spending a significant amount of money to revive a previously mothballed facility in South Carolina. So the first thing is going to be to existing projects and fast tracking those existing projects to completion. New facilities and new product development will come next, as they are much longer term and much more significant investments. And we're seeing quite a few examples of that. I found at least 20 billion in planned builds, including just some examples of that I found: Lithium Americas, Hitachi Energy, Danisco US, Shintech, Formosa, and Chevron Phillips projects, to just name a few.
Okay, so it's not just hypothetical, but practically speaking, how quickly can companies create this new US based manufacturing capacity? You mentioned earlier mergers, acquisitions, building entirely new facilities, and repurposing existing ones. What what is the typical time frame for such large scale changes?
Well, it's usually a combination of all those different options, and the time frame varies widely from company to company, from industry to industry. So typically, an acquisition can be done relatively quickly, 6 months to a year, as well as perhaps integrating existing capacity from another player in your industry. So you buy them, and then you get that capacity. Repurposing an idle facility is faster than building something new. That still could take 12 to 18 months to resurrect a mothballed facility. Building something entirely new from the ground up, whether it's a chemical plant or energy or anything like that, usually takes a number of years, somewhere between 5 and 10, easily, due to the permitting, the construction, and the commissioning phases. So even in the mining sector, it's similar long lead times if you're trying to start up a new mine and that doesn't exist versus expanding an existing one. So while the incentives are clearly there based on legislation that's been passed, it's brand new capacity is really quite a long-term game. It's not an overnight transformation. It's not a 12-month kind of event.
Looking at it from the lab's perspective, what does the expansion mean for the quality assurance and quality control functions specifically? Like, how will that impact the hardware and technology deployed to support these functions from lab operations and software to cutting edge tools like AI?
Well, I think this is where it gets really interesting, and specifically for our audience who's probably interested in sort of what's happening with the laboratories. So, in my experience, back when I worked in the chemical industry, if you're scaling up your manufacturing, then quality control and quality assurance becomes really central because that means you've got to test more materials from different sources. You've got to be supporting new workflows and new manufacturing lines. So, a lot more throughput is required, but not likely a whole bunch of more people. So I think we have to be clear about that. The likelihood that it's going to create a bunch more jobs, I think, is unlikely based on the cost of labor here in the US versus other places, which really was the primary driver for locating those plants elsewhere in the first place. Was either the cost of the raw materials was lower or the cost of the people was lower, or both. So I think on that's sort of the main thing. Related to that, it's going to be a lot of investment in hardware, more automation, whether that's automated analytical systems, whether it's robotics, whether it's in process analyzers, and more investment in that. I think the concept of having to avoid taking samples at all and sending them to a lab will be a focus for new construction to try and avoid that. Very hard to retrofit those kind of things into existing manufacturing, but you can certainly build differently. From a software perspective, obviously robust, fully integrated software systems, including LIMS, will be the central nervous system of what is going on there. Those systems will need to handle increased sample volumes, different variety of complex specifications, integrate seamlessly with instruments, provide real-time integration to process control, inventory, and shipping systems. A lot of that's being done right today, but in addition to that, there's going to be predictive analytics and things like that are going to be required. What you want to think about, though, is if someone's acquiring another firm, it's likely that they already have an existing infrastructure or technology stack, and there'll have to be decisions made about what to keep and what to get rid of, whether to move everyone to a common platform, those type of things. Those are not small projects, that's for sure.
And what about AI?
Well, AI is coming, and it's coming to the laboratory, and it's coming to manufacturing, just like it's coming to every other industry. I think you'll see impact of that. Some of the examples where I think that are more likely in the short term are predictive analytics related to sampling strategies, equipment maintenance, and prevention of quality mishaps and incidents. And it will accelerate the movement of QA and QC to more quality assurance and less quality control, more proactive and predictive, and less reactive to an incident occurring or a deviation occurring.
Another topic of concern is government regulation. There's also talk about potentially relaxing some regulations to foster this growth. What type of regulations are we talking about?
Well, I think in the US, as opposed to the rest of the world, we are definitely seeing a dramatic reduction in regulations related to climate change and environmental protection, as well as planned streamlining of the approval processes for construction of new facilities. Whether you believe that's a good thing or not, it's definitely happening.
When the full implications of this become clear, what does that mean? Will it lead to less need for laboratory operations supporting QA/QC, or actually more? Perhaps due to potentially chaotic supply chains or greater internal scrutiny.
Well, I think it's going to be an interesting time here in the United States. I do believe that there will be a reduction in environmental related testing requirements. And so that type of work will decrease. I do believe that as a result of regulatory relaxation, that's not going to eliminate the inherent need for product quality, product safety, and product consistency. Those aren't going to go away. So that part of the work will stay the same. It's possible with the complexity of the supply chain or moving the supply chain from existing sources that there may be even more complexity and more testing required. And as new facilities come online, rigorous QA/QC is even more critical when you're in the startup phases of a new plant. Companies will still need to meet their customer specification in order to maintain their brand reputation. And no company wants to be, having quality failures that cost money. So if anything, I think that laboratories will need to be more agile and capable of handling diverse requirements, even if, at least in the US, the requirements for environmental testing will decrease. I don't see that happening in the rest of the world. So products that have to be, most of companies of this nature are global in nature. So there still will be need for that type of testing in other parts of the world.
I want to go back to costs for a second. We talked about more capital to build manufacturing domestically with the goal of having more jobs for Americans. But how do businesses address the increased cost of people when reshoring?
Well, at least in my experience, these are high volume, low margin businesses. So because of that, the number and cost of people is carefully managed. And in fact, as I said earlier, a lot of the key drivers of moving manufacturing offshore was to minimize the people cost. So I think what you're going to find is that tariffs aren't going to fix that problem, and that the cost of people will still be an issue. That will drive more investment in technology and automation in the plants that are rebuilt here. But it won't be that there'll be a lot more people. I suspect there will be less people than currently exist in some of these plants that were built in parts of the world where labor was inexpensive.
So this is where lab automation, tools like LIMS, AI, and such play a significant role.
Absolutely. So I think, as I said, you know, there's going to be more manufacturing happening, and it's going to be doing more with less. So that means more automation, means robotics, it means AI, it means software tools, it means predictive analytics, it means automated instrumentation. And all that has to be managed carefully, and it has to be controlled by software. So I think there's going to be a lot of growth in these sort of automated electronic lab notebooks and in dashboarding and limb systems and all these kinds of things that are going to allow us to have minimal human intervention in the sort of ongoing day-to-day activities. And going back to your question about AI agents, I think you'll see those being deployed for routine tasks, automated data review, anomaly detection, things of that nature.
Given all these shifts, the drive for domestic manufacturing, increased QA/QC demands, and staff scarcity, how could lab managers and executives devise a strong strategic roadmap for 2026 and beyond that ensures they'll successfully navigate this landscape and achieve improved business success?
Well, I believe that the key is, first of all, to have a strategy for digital transformation that is aligned with what your overall company is attempting to do. So the laboratory is not an island. So it does need to fit with the overall strategy. But there's a few key steps. And first of all is you need to have a clear understanding of where you currently are versus the best performing laboratories in your industry. So you need to get some benchmarks and evaluate your current state against those benchmarks, come up with where the bottlenecks are, where the opportunities are. Secondly, once you've done that, you need a clear vision for your future state, the fully automated data-driven lab. It's not just about buying some software. It's not just about doing piecemeal projects. It's really about having a fully built out vision of where you're going. Third, I think you need to think about it in the perspective of scalability. So something that can be used throughout the organization. And whether or not you have the current digital infrastructure to support that, may or may not have that, that needs to be part of that as well. And then fourth, of course, is the people component, which often is not thought about because many of your people are not going to be technology savvy with the latest and greatest stuff that's on the market. And so as you move into this new world order, you'll have to train them on how to make best use of this type of technology. Now, maybe you have this type of expertise in-house, maybe you don't. If you don't have it, then you should partner with an expert, sort of like CSols, who knows what can be done And that gives you a competitive advantage in terms of trying to make this vision real.
Awesome. Thank you for that advice. It's obvious that while policies might shift, the fundamental need for quality and efficiency driven by smart informatics remains paramount. Kyle, as our expert guest today, what's one key tip or piece of advice you'd offer our listeners in the chemical and industry sectors who are anticipating an increase in onshoring manufacturing and want to excel at it?
Well, first of all, I'd say take advantage of the opportunity that's been presented to you to reinvent your QA/QC function and truly implement the lab of the future. It's probably once in a decade opportunity to have the funds and support from management to do it. So that would be my number one recommendation, is take advantage of that opportunity.
Great. Thank you for sharing your insights today. It is clear that the intersection of government policy, the expansion of manufacturing plants, and digital transformation is where the chemical and energy sectors will find their competitive edge. And your analysis has provided us with an invaluable roadmap for navigating these current events.
Always a pleasure, Megan. Great to be here.
And to our listeners, I'll add a link to the survey results that I mentioned earlier if you're interested in looking at all of those, as well as a link to the findings that Kyle found when he was doing some research that he mentioned earlier. And that is all the time we have for today's episode of Decoding the Digital Lab. Please join us next time. Hit that follow button if you're enjoying this content. And we also have a newsletter that highlights current events. We send that out on a weekly basis. If you're interested in getting that, please use the link below or the QR code and sign up.